2 Sundays ago, we heard about the Passover and the Israelites' desperate flight from Egypt. In the meantime, the Israelites have crossed the Red Sea, and today they find themselves wandering in the Sinai wilderness. Like so many who start out on a new endeavor with a rush of excitement, their adrenaline has waned, and the magnitude of what the Israelites have done by fleeing Pharaoh hits them like a wave. At least in Egypt, they were housed and fed. Now, they are exposed and hungry, frantic and afraid. An ambient anxiety pervades them. And so the Israelites do what people do in such circumstances then and now. They complain, and they cry out, and they murmur in furtive desperation because they don't know what else to do. The Israelites are hungry in every way. And then one morning, Exodus tells us, there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to another, "Manhu," for they did not know what it was. Manhu, that is literally Hebrew for what is it? And that's what they called this miraculous stuff. What is it? Manhu, manna. All the Israelites know is that it's sweet and it is edible, and that they aren't hungry anymore. Now, as with so many other stories in the Bible, we quickly become preoccupied with the factual details, and we risk losing the meaning. It's sort of like when we would ask, where did Cain and Abel's wives come from? Or, where did Noah's ark hit land? Or, how did Jonah survive in the belly of that fish for 3 days? Similarly, we ask, manhu? What is manna? Well, the 20th century entomologist F.S. Bodenheimer posed a hypothesis. Bodenheimer said that the most plausible explanation was that manna is, quote, the sweet secretion of desert aphids that live on tamarisk trees in the region. The aphids exude the excess sugar they obtain from the trees in the form of droplets that, when dried in the desert air, become flaky, sweet crystals. Delicious. Now, if that nugget of information is the important thing in this story for you, run with it. But lest we forget, the Israelites were probably the engineers who built Pharaoh's pyramids. In other words, they were not primitive people of childish understanding. And yet the nature of the manna, that wasn't important to them. They were content to call this food that rained from heaven, what is it? Because what was important to them was that when they were in such deep need, and they knew only apprehension and confusion and anxiety, God rained bread from heaven. Now we understand that. Intuitively, I think. We know that in our own lives. When we are lost in life's wilderness, some signpost suddenly appears that points us in a new direction. When we're floundering, a hand reaches out as if from nowhere to steady us. When we are overwhelmed by anxiety, a phone call or the direct gaze of a friend catches us. And for just a moment, the anxiety melts. Sometimes such saving graces come through human mediation. Other times, we experience them directly from God. Pause here. I want you to think specifically of an instance in your life when this has happened. When you were in some need, great or small, persistent or passing, and God provided something or someone to sustain you. Like wispy flakes of manna, by themselves and to an outside observer, each of these instances may be insubstantial or ephemeral, or maybe even to that outside observer unnoticeable. But to those of us who've experienced them, we know that they can feed a starving soul. We know that they are bread from heaven. Now, I'm going to share with you one such instance from my own life. And I'm going to say that at the outset, I don't understand it any more than we can understand manna, Professor Bodenheimer notwithstanding. I had not yet received my prostate cancer diagnosis, and the near crippling issues with my back had not yet emerged. It was the summer of 2019, and something in my life just felt off, like when a tire is 10 pounds underinflated, or music is a half note flat. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I walked through my days with a sense of foreboding. Familiar landscapes started to take on the look of wilderness. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you experienced that in your life? And then one weekday morning, I was driving down Wall Boulevard, about to turn right onto Memorial Drive to head into downtown Houston. John Denver's song, Rocky Mountain High, was playing on Spotify, and Denver sang the line, "I've seen it raining fire in the sky." And the world was suddenly different. For a few moments, the veil dropped. The wilderness scattered. And that concrete urban jungle was infused by God. I don't know how else to say it, and trust me, I have tried. By the time I got downtown and reached the cathedral, the veil was back in place. The world had resumed its usual everyday character. But bread had rained down from heaven. The gift of grace had been given. I could not have known what challenges were about to come up in my life any more than the Israelites could have conceived what was coming in theirs. But God gave me manna when I needed it. And I thank God that God did. So what do we do with that? That's the question, isn't it? When the manna appears for us, unexpected and undeserved, how do we respond? Well, this is the day, today, that we launch our fall stewardship campaign. And our Stewardship Council has selected as this year's theme, St. Peter's Council, in response to that very question. How do we respond to God's gift of manna from heaven? Well, St. Peter says, quote, "Use whatever gifts you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in all its various forms." Now, I believe that we scarcely need Peter's instruction because the impulse to be stewards is actually part of the gift. When God sends us a sign, we want to point others to it. When God throws us a lifeline, we want to cast it further. When God rains bread from heaven, we want to feed others. Now, stewardship is not about guilt. It's not even about duty. it's actually not even ultimately about the material needs of the church, as important as those are. Stewardship is about the joy of acknowledging God's gifts to us of manna and then sharing those gifts so that others can be fed. We receive and share the infinite variety of God's grace, to use St. Peter's phrase, through this, our worship, through our friendly fellowship, through our sweaty service, through our ardent prayer and our faithful teaching. And undoubtedly, and with equal joy, we pass along God's grace through our financial commitment to this, God's church. And for the next 6 weeks, that is our faithful work. Pledge packets were mailed out this past week. You likely have already received yours or will receive it soon. And that packet includes a booklet that, with detailed transparency, sets out St. Mark's financial needs for 2024. Please don't throw it away or bury it on the telephone cabinet. Read it cover to cover. Our ministry budgets have not received increases in years. We have deferred maintenance needs on this campus. And inflation, it won't be a surprise to anyone, have ratcheted up our fixed costs just to keep the lights on. Funding all of these things could seem burdensome, except that we have received God's grace as manna from heaven. And sharing God's grace, that's our response in joy. This year, the Stewardship Council and the Vestry are asking that any parishioners who have not pledged in the past make a financial pledge to the parish as your response to God's manna. And for returning pledgers, we're asked this year to consider a Matthias gift in addition to a regular pledge. The Matthias gift is named for Matthias, who was the 13th apostle, not the 5th Beatle, but the 13th apostle, who was added to the original 12 after Easter. Our stewardship booklet explains how this will work, and if you haven't received that booklet in the mail, there are extras in the back of the narthex. But we're to add that Matthias gift to our 12-month pledge as a 13th payment in honor of St. Matthias. And if we increase our pledge base this year by only 10%, and if our returning pledgers will stretch to make a Matthias gift in addition to their regular pledge, then we will meet our budget goal for 2024, and the amazing ministry of this place will continue. So in joy, I report to you first that Jill Thompson and I have already made our pledge for next year, and we have committed to a Matthias gift. With even greater joy, I report to you that already on this day that we launch our campaign, 100% of your vestry have already made their pledge for next year. That is remarkable leadership, and hopefully it serves as both inspiration and aspiration for all of us. How do we make sense of God's grace, of God's manna? What is it exactly, we ask, as the Israelites asked? It's mysterious. It's inexplicable. But we know, and I hope that we will all commit to share, that it is bread from heaven. Amen.